Hello, folks. Welcome to another edition of Social Media News Live. So excited you're here. I am fresh back from Podfest, and Katie is too. And Connor, kinda. It was his neck of the woods, but we got to eat, and that was about it. Then he had to take off. But this is going to be a great show because we talked about getting unstuck while we're there. They had the Unstuck Studios, which we're going to dive into a little bit more. But yeah, I'm so excited for everybody to be back. I mean, I love Fridays. I sound like Kermit because some guy was hacking on me on the plane ride back. So it never fails to happen that I get a cold or something when I go to the great state of Florida. But I'm happy to be here. Connor Brown, how about you? Is it still cold there? What's going on in Florida?
It is still cold. It's sunny now. I mean, there was a statewide emergency, I have to assume, for the 6 inches of snow that north of Tallahassee got, which I don't know how they survived up there. God bless them. But no, it's just cold and rainy here. It's back to being sunny. I'm happy to be back. 2 weeks ago, my internet got cut halfway through the show. And then last week we didn't have a show. Podfest, miss you guys there. But I'm excited to be back and talking to a great person in Katie, of course.
Yeah, Katie, did you make all your flights? Was it all really? Did you make it back okay?
I made all my flights, and I was lucky enough. I'm a huge fan of JetBlue, so I was flying out of the new Terminal C at the Orlando airport. So everyone was messaging me saying like, "Oh, the airport is slammed and everything's awful." And I was looking around, everything was like gorgeous and nice, no people anywhere. Yeah, if you can at all fly JetBlue in and out of Orlando, highly recommend. It was a glorious experience. But
Katie,
Doc flew back to northern Florida and has been there all week. So I sent my one Hawaii employee over to the middle of a Florida snowstorm, which I feel very, very bad about.
That's great. Well, he's there building out Liz Wilcox's studio, which I'm sure we'll talk about. We're going to have her on the show again. And if you want to see that process, I think it's on Ecamm's YouTube channel. They're doing some stuff over there. Well worth the watch. It's really cool to see how I'm build out a studio. So we've already got some of our friends in the house today. We've got Mr. Jim Few saying good morning, Jeff, Kate, and Connor, and Amy Keys, which we missed. It feels like whenever I go to Florida, I see Amy because she's usually there at Momentum. But she says she's excited that Katie is here. I do sound like Kermit because my daughter says, get your banjo out, Kermit. There we go. Not going to happen, Abby. Sorry, not today. And then our friend Ask Ralph saying, hello, my friends. Ralph, it's good to see you again. And we got the amazing Dustin Stout giving us a wave. Of course, the owner and head cheese over at Magi, which is a great program. So I think we're just going to get started because we got so much stuff to talk about. I'm going to hit go on the podcast machine, and we'll get started. Connor, you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Hello, folks. Welcome to Social Media News Live. I'm Jeff C., and you're not.
And I'm Connor Brown, and this is the show that keeps you up to date on what's happening in the world of social media and more.
You ever feel like you're spinning your wheels trying to create content that connects and grow your brand? Maybe you're searching for practical strategies to break through those creative roadblocks. Or maybe you've wondered how to turn ideas into action with consistency and confidence. If any of this sounds familiar, then you're in for an episode you won't want to miss, because this week we're excited to welcome Katie Fawkes, the true leader in the world of video podcasting and content creation. As the director of marketing at Ecamm, Katie works with creators every day to help them overcome challenges and achieve their goals. She's going to be sharing her lessons from Podfest, her insights on video podcasting, and her top advice for getting unstuck in 2025. So sit back, clear your schedule, clear your mind to get ready for this week's episode of Social Media News Live. Katie, how are you doing today?
I'm great. It's Friday. I'm hanging out with you two awesome people. I'm having an awesome week.
That's right. This is going to be fun.
Well, Katie, you are equally awesome. And if you don't know who Katie is, you should. Katie Fawkes is the director of marketing at Ecamm, where she gets to work alongside some of the most amazing live streamers, podcasters, and content creators out there. And she helps them reach their goals and grow their business through video and live streaming. In addition to heading up Ecamm's marketing team, Katie is also the co-host of the video podcasts The Flow and the VHS Club. Katie, thanks again for being here with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm excited.
And by the way, it's not a coincidence, but we are sponsored by the amazing folks over at Ecamm. You can find out more about them at ecamm.com/Jeff. Save 15% on your first purchase over there by using the code Jeff15, ecamm.com/Jeff. We think, I mean, Ecamm's got a great community. If you were there at Podfest, you understand. One of the things I do want to show a photo that I was able to do. I'm sorry for you guys listening. You have to come watch it on YouTube. But they had done the Unstuck Studios, which we're going to be talking about later in the show today, where they had like these 8 different podcast booths. And I'm going to bring up a picture here. There's me interviewing the amazing Lou Mangello, who was inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame. But he's got these 8 little podcasting booths where you can do a video podcast. They record it. They give you a thumb drive when you're done. This thing was full almost every time. We had to ask some people to leave because they were like, "Hey, we're going to do our whole season." But no, it was amazing. It was just so much cool stuff happened. There was actually a little girl, and I have video of her, who came and was interviewing like the head of the podcast movement organization. And she's got this podcast that she was doing, I don't know how long, but she was amazing. But she was only, I don't know what, 9, 10?
She was 9 years old, and she said she's been podcasting for 2.5 years. I was like, that's longer than me, and you're younger than my daughter. I don't even understand. Yeah.
It was fabulous. So if you ever have a chance to go to Unstuck Studios or whatever they call it, their next podcast convention, go to it because it's very, very cool. They'll demo Ecamm for you. Everybody was using Ecamm. It was a really fun time, and it was a great service. So thanks for Ecamm for doing that. That was really, really cool. But we're going to talk about how to get unstuck today. We've got people coming in, and we'll get to some of those comments later. But I want to talk about, it was talked about all through Podfest, and it was video podcasting, right? So we were talking about, what's coming up. Everybody seemed to have a video component. There was a whole video track at Podfest. So, Katie, you set up this Unstuck studio. We talked about it. There's sessions on it. What trends are you seeing in video podcasting for 2025, and how kind of are they shaping the content landscape?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting movement, I guess, for lack of a better word. So if you know at all the history of podcasting actually started it with video. So video is not new to podcasting, but we've had this kind of last few years of mostly audio only podcasts, and that's kind of what people think of when they're thinking of a podcast or consuming a podcast. But in the last couple of years, on the other side certainly of the pandemic, now everyone has access to video and has access to create video in a much more sustainable and affordable way. And so now we're seeing video coming back into the podcasting space, and I think a lot of people trying to figure out the best way to incorporate video in a way that works for their show and for their workflows. And so certainly you have some people who are creating these like insanely incredible television style podcasting studios in their home or in spaces that they're renting or have purchased in their hometown or in their area. And then you have other people who are, like myself and like Jeff and Connor are creating these shows as a live show and then using that to power the video for their podcast and everything in between. So it's been this interesting coming together of video and audio. And I think we're going to see a lot more of different kinds of video and audio. So it's not necessarily going to be, a video podcast or a live stream or an audio only podcast. I think it's going to be content and shows and different ways to build a community and engage with people. It's a really fun place and space to be. So if you've been sitting on the fence, it's
right.
It's now. It's yesterday, but if not yesterday, it's today, because there's just some really cool stuff happening at every level. So you don't have to be you don't have to go all in to be able to be part of this movement, but I'm willing to bet that once you start, it's you'll find yourself running in no time, because it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think video is so important in today's world just because of what we're doing, right? We might be at home, but we're going to have something on the TV playing in the background, right? It's just kind of what we're doing. Less people are commuting, all those sorts of things. YouTube is the #1 streaming platform in the world, more than Netflix, more than any other streamer combined. And a lot of that, I think, is because of video podcasting, right? These long form content mediums. But back in the day, when a podcast was just audio, it was easy, right? Meaning it was easy to record. Once you got everything set up, you pressed a button, you talked into the microphone, you recorded it. Video does add another component to it that can scare some people away, right? I have friends that stopped doing a video podcast. Why? Because they realize, well, we have to get done up. We have to put on our makeup. We have to put on appropriate clothes, right? And we have to look camera ready. So, Katie, there's some challenges that video podcasters are going to face that audio podcasters don't face. How can people overcome them, knowing that video podcasting can open you up to so many doors where audio podcasting is kind of limiting you? So how do they overcome the challenges that only come with video podcasting?
Yeah, look, I think we're all overthinking it. So I will say that right from the get-go. I think the idea of video for people who have not traditionally done it makes us think that we need to be this very buttoned up version of ourselves, right? Like I couldn't possibly be on camera unless I'm wearing my fanciest clothes and my background looks perfect and, and I have the best possible camera. And these are all things that are getting in the way of us connecting with our audience, helping people, building a community, creating content, getting better at all of this ourselves. So I hear you. I hear your fears. I've been there as well. But convince yourself to turn on the camera and just be you. If that's you on the sofa in your pajamas podcasting, great. People actually want to see that more than you sitting really, formal in this environment. So I would say if you can push yourself past that and just try and see what the response is, you don't have to do the most to get out of it. You can use your phone as a camera. You can, you could use your built-in camera on whatever computer. Just test the waters and see what the results are, because I'm willing to bet your audience just wants to hear from you in a way where they can connect with you, right? So you're opening up another opportunity for them to spend time with you. The second thing that I will say is that you don't have to do your entire show as a video. Some of my absolute favorite podcasts out there are not actually like traditional video podcasts, quote unquote. They are an audio podcast predominantly, but they will do these like incredible, fun, special video moments for their audience. So it's like, hey, everyone who's part of my Patreon, or, this is a special night for our members or our audience where we're all going to work on a project together live on YouTube. And so the camera quality doesn't actually matter all that much in that moment, because it's no different than spending time in like a Zoom call with your friends during the pandemic, right? It's about getting together, spending time with your people, answering questions, being present in that space and in that moment with them. So turn off kind of the voices in your head that are telling you you're not good enough, or you don't look the way you want to look, or your space isn't the way you want. You take those first steps, figure out the results, and then work to get a little bit better every single time, and figure out what makes sense for you and for your show and for your audience, how you're going to incorporate video in. So there's not one size fits all. There's what works best for you, best for your crew, your audience, your community.
Connor, real quick though, we do not want you to show up next week in your pajamas. Okay,
I give you permission, Connor.
No, she was just being kind. Nobody wants to see that.
I get it.
Mickey ears, full robe. Yeah,
we'll put that behind.
That's
the paywall.
for your OnlyFans.
Pay for that. That makes sense.
We got some great comments. Some people actually said that, like Ralph says, funny, I just met with a designer. I'm creating a studio here at my office so I can have a dedicated studio space for my daily show where I do both audio and video. Now, Katie's, I think, point was like, you don't have to be super fancy and wait and build out a space. You can do what you can now and then upgrade to that. And the one thing that I would say is, it's really, if you're going to create content, having a dedicated place. It doesn't have to be a fancy set, but as long as you have a desk that the mic's always set up and a camera's always there, because you want to have the least amount of friction as possible to create content, because you're gonna, I got to set up my camera. Oh, I got to, and all that stuff. And if it's already there, you have less excuses of not to create content. Would you agree, Katie?
Yeah, I agree. And again, like if you want to, and you have the budget to build out an entire studio, absolutely. Like if that's the vibe and that's, that's how you want your show to be and the content you want to create, go for it. I think a lot of people let that idea be the stumbling point and the excuse to not get started. It's like, well, I'll get there as soon as I'm done building out my studio, and as soon as I'm done buying all of these things, and as soon as I save up for XYZ fancy camera someone told me I needed to get. Look, I I head up marketing at a video production company, right? So like we make a tool that does video production. I am on the cheapest possible webcam, which looks great. And I use my laptop and I carry it down. When I sit down on my desk, I open it up and I click it into my webcam and I'm ready to go. I have access to way more expensive gear. I could build out an entire studio. I could do all these different things, but that was overcomplicating my setup and getting in the way of me just creating content. I was thinking so much about like, is this set up correctly? Do I need to change this out? Do I need to move? Days and weeks were going by when I wasn't just recording my show or recording the videos that I needed to record. So I've actually intentionally simplified everything down because that's what works for me. But someone like Doc or, a number of our customers, like what works best for them is a fully built out studio. That's like where they feel most creative. That's what works best for them. And they have the budget and the time to do that. And it isn't getting in the way of what they're trying to create. So whatever it is, just remember it's uniquely personal and there is no wrong way to do it except not doing it.
Yeah.
If you want to do it and you're letting those voices get to you, that's wrong. But everything else is optional and totally up to what works best for you.
Chris Stone, my friend Chris Stone from Casthead says, glad Katie mentioned fun. It's the best part of podcasting. That's why we do this live, is so I can bring up clips. I like the interaction. Live video to me is like, that's what we've been doing since, here we go, Chris Stone, the Google Plus days. And one, because I was lazy and I wanted to have audio and video. We can argue if a podcast, something on YouTube's a podcast or not. Chris and I and Ralph is some of the people who show up every Saturday for Dave Jackson has a live show, and that's a debate. And my thing is like I just want to make it easy for people to create content, and I want to have conversations live. Like our friend Gary Stockton says, some video podcasts incorporate clips and images, and he likes to watch the YouTube versus audio on some. So yeah, that's the cool thing is there's multiple ways to get content. But I wanted to kind of, and Paul has this great Mr. Moderator. Paul Duncan is amazing, and he says, "Be who you are, so when people meet you in public, you aren't someone else." That that sounds like simple,
so true.
But it's a lot of these influencers and creators are not. So, what are your thoughts on that, Katie? Like, you are who you are when I meet you at a conference or here on the show. I think that is a misperception that people try to do a persona when they first start. What do you tell those people?
Again, you do you. If that works really well for you, I will say that I've been on this kind of content creation journey for the last 5 years. When I first started, I wanted to look totally professional, quote unquote, buttoned up. I wanted everyone to know how smart I was and how well-spoken I was. And it didn't work. I felt terrified every single time that I was on camera. I hated how I felt, horrible, and laughed at myself and was open and honest about the things that were stressing me out or causing me to stop. That people started sending, questions along and admitted that they had those feelings as well. And it's that admission and kind of, just being real with who I am, both to myself as well as to everyone else, that the community started and that the community supported and that growth was able to happen. So if you're, I don't know, if you have a persona and that makes sense for you, fine. I have not found that it is helpful for me in any case. And I will say, as Paul's comment alludes, like I've met some of the people that I watch online and they have been different, and it is a little bit disappointing where you're like, oh, I thought, like, because you do in this medium, whether it's live streaming or podcasting, you feel like you know the people that you are spending time with. You feel like they are friends with you. In many cases, they are, depending on the size of the show. So it is disappointing when you get there and you're like, oh, we're not friends. Like you're not actually like how I see you on camera. And so it's something to be aware of for sure, that, whether or not you realize that you are building a relationship with someone that maybe you've never met, and maybe you don't even know you're building a relationship with them, but you are, and they're watching and they're listening to what you have to say. So you need to take some responsibility in owning that and realizing what their expectations are for you.
One of the things there was an influencer who burnt out, like it was a big YouTuber or something. And one of the things they said is they could not continue the persona when they would go to conferences and stuff because it wasn't who they are. They were either really extroverted and they were really introverted, and people were expecting that. And it caused even more angst because they were so burnt out. They could not keep that persona going. So be who you are. And like, I stumble my words all the time. I will say the wrong thing, but that's me. And I'm not gonna, and my daughter's always like, "Oh, Dad, I gotta edit that." But she's the one who tries to make me sound good. So, but yeah, be who you are.
And I think that's also what makes it the easiest, right? Katie did a great presentation this past year at Momentum, and she showed her kind of progression of being on camera, and she's really vulnerable. But I think you just start now, you be who you are, and it's so much easier to continue down that path and record and you'll always get better. But for people starting out, there's the tech side of things too, right? You do want to put yourself in a good enough spot to where your message is being conveyed properly. People distracted by your audio or your video or anything like that, right? Eden talks about how she did her first entire year of podcasting with the default headphones and mic that came with her iPhone 6 Plus, right? And then the opposite side of that, Jeff, I don't know if you see this one, but our friend Sean from But Mostly Disney, it's hard to avoid gas, though. And of course, gas, not the kind of flatulence that Jeff knows all about, but it means gear acquisition syndrome, right? So kind of balancing those two out, knowing we need tech to put our best foot forward to show that our message is getting out there properly. So Katie, what kind of recommendations do you have for someone just starting out or about to start their first video podcast, the tools and platforms you think are great to start with?
All right. So I am a very big believer in keeping it incredibly simple. So I would say before you even get to this step, I will ask you, do you understand what your show is about and how you want it to visually or auditorily look and sound? Like, what is the flow? We call it a run of show. What does an episode look like in your mind? And if you can, whiteboard it out, draw it out, write it out, talk it out, get it out of your mind and out into the world in some way. But this is literally before you open a computer, touch a computer, look at any of the gear, what you want it to look and sound like. Because once you have that, then you can figure out what gear and what software is going to work best to help you get to that point. So, for in the movie review podcast that I do with my best friend, the VHS Club podcast, right? I know that I want to have mostly me and Nat on screen together side by side. That's the majority of my show. I want some kind of rating system at the end, right? We rate movies in potatoes. So I want like a potato to come up on screen,
right?
Or a number of them, depending on the movie. And then I want, an intro music or countdown timer or something like that. And then an outro music countdown timer. That's how I want it to look. So then I need to figure out, what are the pieces that I need to get there? So obviously I'm going to need a computer because it's more than just recording on my phone because I want all those graphics and elements, right? I need some kind of microphone and audio to capture. I need a camera. Natalie's in Montreal and I'm in the Boston area, so I need to connect with her in some way. So I need to go through and figure out what are the best solutions for those things based on my needs and my budget, right? What can I afford and what can I have in this? So I have a really simple setup. I have an older Shure MV7 microphone. I did not start with this one. I started with a much cheaper, smaller microphone. And I have a OBSBot Meet 2 camera. It's a $129 4K webcam. There are even cheaper options from OBSBot available. But for a while, Nat was using, is now up to the same camera as me. But for the longest time, she was using the cheapest possible Shure microphone and her built-in webcam on her laptop. And that's it. And, and we're creating it with Ecamm in many ways because that's what I know and use. Mm-hmm. Who knows? Maybe I may have made a different decision if I wasn't working from Ecamm and my budget allowed me, maybe I would have learned OBS because I didn't have the money. You need to think through what you can spend in time, and what your needs are. So again, it's really easy to get recommendations from everyone else. What you really need to think about is, what is the content? What are the goals? What is your, like, how big is your space? I have a small space, so I need not big things. And what do you want to create? Because I cannot tell you how many, I even talked to a woman yesterday, helping her get up and running with Ecamm. And she was like, I bought Ecamm and I'm in here and I have a teleprompter and I have the camera. And I said, oh, well, what's your content? What are you trying to create? And she was just like, well, I'm thinking of starting like this show, and I'm thinking of also using it for presentations. And I was like, nope, like, we need to put all the gear away. You need to sit and sketch out what are the things you want to do, because the features you want to have open, the gear you want to use in the space are different depending on what you want to accomplish. So please avoid gas. Please avoid gas as much as possible.
So when I started, and I'm in a portable building. Like, I have a short throw. I'm against a wall. I don't have a lot of space. It's a portable building out in my backyard. I have a 30-second commute. So I had to work with what I had. But the cool thing is, I was using Ecamm before they sponsored the show. So what it allows me to do is very rapidly do a show. Like, this is a basic, like, I need to do a rebrand, but people seem to like this. And actually, all I did was I went to those big CNBC and Fox News and MNSP, and looked at what they were doing, right? The news shows. And I just took screenshots, and then I built it based off of that. Like, all my camera views, all this is pretty much the standard, but it lets me, like, I can change the lower thirds and the titles and all this stuff like that fast with Ecamm. So there's not a big, frustration trying to set up a show each week, because you can't do that when you're trying to go live every week. The other thing is, I have, and we argued about this at our panel at Podfest, because I have 3 sections of my show with 5 questions each every time. Now, do we use all those questions? No, but it lets me flow the show. Let me get it the way I want, and then I have a way I can repurpose it easily. That's why I do it. So find something that works. Like Chris Stone and I, totally different way we run a show. His show's his show. It's amazing. Like, if you haven't seen Dealcasters and the stuff they put out, incredible editors, but it's different from mine. But it's okay. I don't have to copy them. He didn't have to copy mine. We all have audiences. So do what works, but use Ecamm. That's all I'm saying.
And I think one gas to have, if you're going to have gas, is to always go audio first, right? Make your audio better first, and then your video can follow. People will turn off your audio podcast or your video podcast if the audio is crackly, if it sounds like you're in an echo chamber, right? They'll turn it off immediately, but they will stick around if your video is, 300 IP, right? If it's really
decent.
Standard def, whatever it is.
True.
Well, but mostly Disney says the 3 of you are very real. I'm thinking, hopefully that's a compliment. And not something else.
It's like, I'm getting out of here.
And
you're not AI.
And then Paul says, start with what you have, and then add as you figure out what you need and understand how to use it. Very, very true. And invest in yourself. Like, if you don't have something, it's fine. Like, I know Chris Stone is going to throw up, but I used the Blue Yeti forever, because that's what I had. And I had a nice one. I had the Pro version, and I knew how to use it. And I used it, and it wasn't the best mic. And I have an incredible one from Shure right now. But use what you have, and then invest as you go along.
When did we start getting so, like, judgy as well? I mean, the amount of people who Chris, this is your fault, who come up to me at events and are like embarrassed to say that they have a Blue Yeti microphone. They're like, oh, but I only have a Blue Yeti microphone. I know that you have a Shure microphone. I don't care what microphone you're using. Does it work? Does it sound great? Are you reaching your audience? Like, stop. We need to stop feeling bad or making other people feel bad about what their setup is. Like, if people can hear them and to a lesser extent see them, like that's really what matters. Because as you said, like, you're gonna figure out like what works or what you want to spend on down the road, and maybe you'll get to whatever your perfect is, or the coolest thing that you want to add in. But don't listen to what Chris said. It's okay. Start there and get better.
So, and this is all the time. Like, if you go and like interview people at your church or your your parent teacher association, whatever, nobody's creating content. If you're creating content, you're like in the top, 2% of everybody else. And so get better, but you already doing something incredible if you're creating content. Most people are not doing what you're doing. We always look at those big people around us like Connor Brown and Katie Fawkes and go, oh, I wish I could be like them. And they all started with 0 followers and at the beginning too. And that's just where we all start. So with that, I want to move on to the next section, kind of being unstuck as a creator. We kind of talked about video podcasting. And this is a great question from Mr. Fred, Get Me Coding. He says, a challenge can exist if you're unsure to be the company or the you. Because we were talking about you can only be you. Katie, you're kind of in this as well as Connor. I'm kind of a different animal, but you work for Ecamm. That's your steady job, but you also have some other podcasts. Connor is, he has a marketing job, but he also does his Vacation Kingdoms podcast and website and all that kind of stuff. So how do you guys navigate those waters? Katie, I want to start with you. Like, when you're the company versus being you, do you have to change it? What would you tell Mr. Fred?
I've let those blend together. I don't know if that's the right or wrong thing to do. It works for me. I feel like I've just sort of accepted that I'm the Ecamm lady. I'm the public face to some extent of the brand. I understand intuitively the mission and the focus of Ecamm, and it aligns really well with who I am as a person and what my mission and focus are. So I'm in a very easy space. If I was working for a company where I wasn't personally aligned with their mission, I think I would not be as public or vocal. I would probably just be a lot quieter, and I would, my personal stuff would be personal, but I would take less interviews, and I would not be, I think, as vocal. So I'm in a bit of a good space. It obviously depends on who you're working for, or what your kind of day job is. For me, it just connects so perfectly with everything that I'm trying to accomplish personally, and and the people are the same in my personal life as my professional life, and so it's just one kind of big blended thing that works for me. But I totally, that may not be the case for many of you watching or listening.
What about you, Connor? I know like Gary Stockton's in the house, and he does a pro podcast for the company that he works for, and he also is on this show a lot and watching and commenting, so he has got to navigate that too. So Connor, where do you fall in this? Like, I know it's a balance for you as well.
Yeah, I try to keep my day job totally separate of all of this stuff, just because stepping on toes and stuff like that. But I think it's a good point you bring up, Jeff, about like when you want to start. Do you want to start as like an quote unquote entity, right? Like a name that isn't your God-given, legal name, or do you want to be just yourself? And for me, I've always had a brand behind whatever I've been doing. It's Vacation Kingdoms now, and the reason is I always wanted it to be an easy way for new people to come in. So when they know what that Vacation Kingdoms means, that's how you kind of attract new listeners and new followers and those sorts of things. But I think then I get them to stay because of who I am, right? Like Vacation Kingdoms is the sum of its parts. It isn't just the entire thing, right? The only reason it exists, of course, is me and the people I have on my show and stuff. So I think I always try to approach it as that. I found it to be a bit more easier to attract new people when you have a quote unquote brand behind you. And then I've found it easier to retain people and make them lifelong listeners and eventually friends when you just put yourself forward in that sort of capacity.
Those are good answers. So I think once again, it's you have to navigate the waters. Like I worked for some companies, they did not like you at all to have another presence, and I'm like, well, I can't work for you for much longer because that's not who I am. So I understand you guys who struggle with that and trying to balance the waters. I think now it's probably easier than ever, and one of the things is not to hold yourself back, but to move forward, like what we've been talking about. And that's one of the next question, Katie, I wanted to kind of bring up is like, we've got some great people in the audience, and Dustin even said, thank you for saying that. I've been so paralyzed by feeling like I'm going to be judged for not having a good microphone. I think a lot of people hold back from that when they just need to go on and put in the reps. Like nobody is great when they start out. Like everybody's horrible, to be honest. Like maybe there's some unicorn out there that just kicked butt like when they first started, but most of us are like, I hit a wrong button and now I'm, whatever's happening. Geese are landing on my front office door. What do I do about that? I mean, you have these things when you go live. So, what advice would you give creators who feel stuck when it comes to producing consistent content? Because just producing, one-off every couple months you're not a content creator. You're a hobbyist and you're just kind of maybe for fun. But to be consistent, what advice would you give creators who feel stuck?
Oh my gosh. Consistency is probably one of the hardest things, and it really ties into habits and what your good habits and your bad habits are. You're going to need to simplify. So if you make your system and your workflow way too complicated, it's going to be really difficult for you to keep consistent, especially when things get busy. And then you're going to need to think about like how it fits into your life, right? So for me, I work full time for Ecamm. I'm a parent. I have way more pets than any person should have. I like to travel. I have tons of friends. So I do a lot of things. So the idea of starting another podcast for myself, felt daunting. I was like, how am I going to be consistent with this? And the answer for me on that was, I'm going to do it live. So I know that as people start showing up to it, that's going to hold me accountable. Like if they're there and I'm not there, I'm going to need to have a good reason for not being there. Mm-hmm. But I also knew that I'm doing that show with a best friend who has some health problems. And so there are going to be times where I'm not going to be able to be consistent, and I'm going to need to be okay with that if this is the show that I want to do. So I think kind of, again, simplifying as much as you can, understanding who you are, what you're like, where your line is, like, what are you okay with or not okay with? And then just forgive yourself. There are days where I have a list of like, I would desperately love to be better at being more consistent with promoting video clips on Instagram or YouTube Shorts. And I'm just not yet. But I'm still doing the show, and it's still on my to-do list, and I'm going to just slowly get there until it's become part of my regular workflow and my routine. And it annoys me sometimes, and I have to remind myself that I'm still doing the show. So my line and my bare minimum is get the show out every single week as much as I'm able to. Then the other stuff, do it as best as I can and try to make it, as much a part of my system and as a habit as I can. But yeah, I guess like simplify as much as you can, and then know where your lines are and understand stop working against yourself. What are the best times and the best workflows that work for you?
Yeah. I think for me, if I wasn't doing a show every Friday at 10 a.m. Central and having that locked in time, it would be really hard for me to be consistent. I mean, even last week when we were at Podfest, I'm like, I still had to go record. It didn't work going out live because the internet stunk, because I was going to try to do a show live from the Unstuck studios. But but I recorded, so I have those that I'll be sharing out this week. But showing up every week and seeing people like Shannon and Ralph and Get Me Coding, Mr. Fred, everybody who I know is in there and I can talk with, and they're putting comments in, man, that jazzes me up. Like that's why you do it, and that's one reason I love live, and I get to hang out with Connor and cool people, and so Connor / cool people
and cool people,
other cool people, that's what I meant.
Okay. Hey, I think we should take this comment from Sean, because I think it's really cool, but mostly at Disney, what he's talking about. Because I think the successful people we all see, the one common denominator is that they're consistent, right? And that's what we're all talking about right here. And Sean says, so we're on our week 16. Congrats of his podcast.
Awesome.
Haven't missed a week yet, but we have trouble doing on the same day at the same time. Worried it'll be tough to build a community without being more consistent. I'd love to hear from Katie and Jeff. What do you think about that? Like showing up every week, but maybe at a different time or day. Do you think that in the long run, that's going to impact Sean?
Go ahead, Katie.
So Sean, I will say I am also struggling with that right now. So again, on my personal show, we do mostly, we now joke that we're on most Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. We're live on YouTube, but there are things that happen. And so sometimes almost the entire month of February, we're having to move the show to Wednesday night at 9. I will say, don't let that stop you from moving forward. So that's not my ideal. That's not how I want the show to run. I'm trying to be as open and honest with my community as I can. Like, hey, this is why it's important for you to be on my email list, because sometimes things might shift and I want you to know what's happening and where we are. And I'm sorry, because I know that this is not my ideal. Like, I would love to just be Thursdays at 9. That's my goal. And then try to see if you can get back on track. So there's something that's stopping you from keeping at your regular day and time, whatever that is, or what your goal day and time is. So see if you can solve those issues, but don't let how that makes you feel stop you or have you saying like, oh, well, because I'm not doing it consistently, my community isn't going to build, so I shouldn't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Try to figure out how you can get yourself back on track. Be as honest as you can with your community. People are like, they've shown up for you. So if they can make it work, they'll make it work. And if they can't, they will listen later or catch you, on a replay if you're doing it as a live show. Try to get back on track and give yourself a little bit mercy, because 16 weeks is great. You're doing a great job, even if it's not the same time every time. That
is awesome. Now, I will be, for me, I'm in a different situation. I don't have a full-time job with like Katie and Connor. So I have a little bit more flexibility. But my thing is it's always going to be at 10 a.m. Central, because that's the way it's always been. Because with the algorithms and just the crappy notifications that come out, you don't get notified anymore. So having it, because like I know Dave Jackson, always Saturday, 9:30 my time. That's my ritual now. Like I get some coffee, I turn on my iPad, and I watch what's going to happen. So that's just because I know it's every Saturday at this time. And that's what I wanted for this show. Like, because the notifications are bad, not everybody subscribed to my email list, but you can at jeffc.com/news. You can, they don't get all those notifications. So being consistent at that same time, I think is if you can do it and do it long-term, I think it makes a big difference. Even when you skip, like last week we skipped and I had people message me like, hey, missed you. Would have loved to have seen your show, but I understand you were at Podfest, da-da-da-da. That's what you want. And so I really, really like staying consistent. Connor, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think staying consistent in at least one aspect, right? So Sean, if you have an audio version too, forgive me, I can't remember. If you take the live and turn it into an audio, have that be consistent, right? Say, no matter when I'm going to go live this week, it's going to come out the next Monday, right? At this time, every single Monday. I think that's a way to remain consistent with that. But then I would say over the next 4 or 5 weeks, just do a daily diary, right? And see, hey, when do I have free time? And match up the patterns over a 4 or 5 week time frame, so you can see, oh, every Wednesday I have this little 45-minute window or whatever. Maybe I can just schedule it for that.
And Gary has a great point too. He says that it's easier to do a solo podcast versus a team podcast. One of my favorite podcasters, Jay Klaus, he's also doing something. He has like his interview show, but he's also doing these things now called listen notes, which are just basically him with his phone. You can hear his new baby in the background, and he's just telling his thoughts. But it's another way for him to connect with his audience. They're loving those short episodes. So you could do something like that as well, kind of to mix it up. But Jim also says, I think sometimes we undervalue the amount of replay viewers. It's tough to make a time and date that works for everyone, especially post-pandemic. People are not home all the time. And I think that goes back to Connor and Jim's, and I know Chris Stone's point is making the audio really important, because people will forgive bad video, but they won't forgive bad audio. So, but even a cheap mic, you can make sound decent. So don't be scared of that as well. So I think those are all great things that we're talking about, but that consistency I think is key, and finding the time. And even Paul says, also consider maybe you need to change the date if that would help you. So as long as you're consistent and you're like, nobody's showing up on Saturdays at 10, they're all going to Dave Jackson's show, I need to do a different time. I mean, when we did our show, another popular show was like an hour before, and I was trying to like maybe get some viewers to come over to mine. That's why we did it at this time, and then it just became a habit. So I think those are all good things. So real quick, Katie, I want to talk about video podcasters. A lot of people want to do it. We've talked before on the show and Connor and I have talked about how with the rise of AI, people are not trusting maybe the written word or even YouTube videos there's whole AI channels, but live video and video podcasts offer something very intimate and special that AI can't really duplicate as of yet. And I think it's going to be really hard to do in the long term. But can you talk about how video podcasters can leverage Ecamm, because you know it really well, it's what we use, kind of to simplify and streamline their production process as a video podcast?
Yeah, I mean the cool thing about Ecamm is that it is an entire video production studio. So, so if you want to use it for live streaming, great. If you want to use it for recording videos, great. You want to present into Zoom or Teams or Meet, awesome. Recording, Instagram or Instagram Reels or TikTok, thank God it's back, or anything in between, you can do that in Ecamm. And what's neat about it is that you can plan everything out. So I'm a super planner. I like to think I'm pretty organized. And so you can use what Ecamm's got this feature called profiles. So you can set up different profiles. So like I have one for the VHS Club podcast. I have one for The Flow, which is the show that I do with Doc. I have one for Zoom meetings. So like how my video looks in a Zoom meeting is already set up and ready to go. I have one for recording vertical videos. So it just means that it makes it fast and easy and professional for you to show up in the places that you want to show up on video. And it does it across everything. So you're going to be using video to some extent in your day-to-day, whether it's your full-time job,
Right.
a hobby, podcasting, everything in between. So you want a tool that is going to help you do it all versus trying to learn 17 different tools to do each aspect. Believe me, I have too many tools as it is right now. So that I would say is probably the best part of Ecamm, is that it really is your central hub for video. So it's there. You have it all built out the way that you want to for all the different kinds of video projects that you are doing and are likely to do in the future. And it just works, as Jeff said. And this is what I've been trying to convince people, and I have not yet pulled it off, because we all overthink and we all want to be this very high up version of ourselves. But you can just turn it on and go. You do not
Right.
have to have every conceivable fancy graphic. You don't need to be using all of the 8 million features in it. You can close all the windows and just record a video. So like you just said, Jay's show where he's doing listen notes.
Mhm.
The second you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, I could totally do something like that for like both of my shows.
Right.
And again, in seconds, I could just open that up as a vertical video, record that. I'd have the audio and the video, and I could go. So I just, these days, there's so much noise. We're all so busy. We are all feeling beside ourselves with everything we are doing, should be doing, wish we were doing. So less is more. Find ways to,
Right.
To make it an easier process and to be able to fully learn one thing so that you're great at that and can take that into all the different aspects of your life.
Yeah. So like Gary said, that's what I do, but for different platforms, vertical, landscape, and square.
Yep.
He's got all his
Yeah.
stream decks set up for it.
Yep.
And like Billy Thorpe, who's been on the show, says Ecamm fam. Like
Hey, Billy!
there's also a really great community. And like I said, before they even sponsored the show, I was a big fan of Ecamm because it just worked, and you can create things from scratch. You can have things set up, easy, make templates. So it's really, really easy to do. Connor, were you going to say something? I cut you off.
I was just gonna echo Katie's statement about it being a video production tool. It's not just live streaming, right? It's you can record it and then you can edit it later if you want to, or you can record it without going live and do all that. The profile thing, I have 2 set up, one for my podcast and then one for where I'm the director of agent development at an agency. I have that set up just for training videos. So I do training videos in Ecamm, and then I publish them to our agents for them to help. So it's a tool, not just for live streaming, but for creating your video podcast. If you don't want to live stream, if you just want to have a video format of it. And that's why it's so, so, so awesome.
So it's funny. I got to pull this up from Paul. He goes, Ecamm, a community that comes with an app. Yeah, that is so true because they have an amazing community. In fact, I watched, yesterday they're releasing a new beta version, and people go crazy. But that's the one thing. They're always coming out with new things. Their community is very strong. They got tons of shows on how to use Ecamm correctly. So once again, It is a commercial because I'm going to pull up my ecamm.com/Jeff. If you want to know more, use code Jeff15 to save 15%. But yeah, it's just it's an amazing group. I hope you guys can know that it's not just a plug, but we all really, really like it. In fact, one of the things that Katie did and the whole team in Ecamm set up a kit, like ecamm.kit.com/podcast. That's all about video podcasting. It's their course on how to go through video podcasting from their Unstuck studios. It's so Ecamm, that's with 2 M's, .kit.com/podcast. You can go in and see all these training videos on how to set up a video podcast, which we've been talking about, which is awesome because it's Katie and Doc and other people in there. So very, very cool. You want to say anything about that real quick, Katie?
Yeah, I mean, and let us know what we're missing. So we intentionally made this, as I've been saying all episode long, we intentionally made this as kind of simple as we can. So hopefully it doesn't feel too big. You can watch these in order, or you can just watch the videos to answer the questions you have. We've linked all of the overview videos to episodes of our show that dive deeper with experts and with additional resources and content. So again, like pick up the things that you need to learn to get going, and then go back and fill in kind of those knowledge gaps as you go. But if we're missing something and you're like, hey, Katie, nowhere here do you discuss what the heck an RSS feed is, like, we'll go back and add those videos in, because it's important for us to know how to better help everyone. It's important for us to figure out maybe what features Ecamm might be missing for podcasters. So we're always happy to take those questions and to build that content for you and help you be better at it. But yeah, completely free. You don't have to be using Ecamm to go through the course. You don't have to be using Ecamm to be part of the community. We really, honestly, just want you to be successful. And really, the amount of people who are like, I bought a Mac just so I could use Ecamm is staggering to me. So I'm willing to bet that when you spend time with our people.
Sean just said that. He goes, I switched this week and cannot wait. I got a Mac just for Ecamm. When they did when you could have the isolated video and audio tracks, I went out and did the same thing because I had Mac, but I didn't have the new silicone that you need to run it. So I feel your pain, but it's so worth the investment. So I'm glad you did that. And then
Sean,
Chris,
congrats on getting a Mac. You're now cool person now.
That's right. You're now
I know, speaking of
just like
people
us
for computers.
Right. And then Chris says, loving the new beta audio plugins for the win. Yeah. So that was one of the big things announced. So and Paul says, if things change, we will change the podcast course, which it's just a really cool course. So I want to pull up from my pal Shannon real quick. He's watching over YouTube. So he doesn't go live, but he does release regularly, and he's noticed in my analytics people are consuming more when they have time, and his analytics after he posts grows the following day. He's got a really great YouTube channel. Shannon teaches all about podcasting. He was the one who actually helped me get set up when I first started this journey many moons ago. He also helps me with Guy Kawasaki's podcast. But I want to talk about really quick, and that kind of that same note, things that you guys learned from what we just did at Podfest, your Unstuck Studios and everything there. So really quick, tell what Unstuck Studios was at Podfest and kind of those ideas behind creating these podcast pods that I showed up at the beginning of the show. That's me and Lou doing a recording there. But talk about that a little bit and maybe some things you've learned from Podfest.
Yeah, so we've been doing events like Podfest for the last 5 years, of all different kinds of topics, across all across America and overseas in the UK and other places. And what we realized, regardless of whether we were sponsoring a stage or had a booth or anything in between, was that people really, even if they were incredibly excited about getting into video or about trying Ecamm, they would get back home afterwards and they would email and be like, I tried and I have all of these questions, and they seemed stuck, right? They seemed like overwhelmed. They weren't quite sure exactly what to do. And so the last year, we've been really focused on this idea of, okay, if people are stuck, let's help them get unstuck. And what really feels great when you're at an event is actually getting to do the thing that you want to do, so that the questions will hit you in the moment and you can ask someone that's there to show you how to do it, so that when you get home, you've had that experience. So you still might have questions. There's still stuff you're going to need to get set up and figure out as you're building it, but you'll have had that experience and you'll understand, like, what Ecamm looks like, how to record a video, how to record a podcast, what are the different cameras that are available, what do the different mics sound like. So we are intentionally creating this experience, and we plan to do it at future shows as well, where we're just going to welcome you into our studio space. All of the nooks are outfitted with Mac computers, Ecamm. We have microphones and cameras from different partners. We have stream decks on site so that you can literally just ask your questions, record right from our space, and have that level of, honestly, gives you a little bit more confidence and checks the box. You've done it. Like,
right.
No more is someone leaving the event being like, well, I'm going to take this giant list of to-dos and I'm going to maybe start my podcast next week. Because it feels big. So start your podcast from the event. Do your first episode right there, and then you're done. And then you have your questions, and you know how hard or not hard it is, and you have a better understanding of what's possible. So it was a great experience. In answer to like what I learned from this event or from being in Unstuck Studios is that people are overthinking it. So they think that they need every conceivable thing that they've seen in all of the different YouTube videos and listen to all the different podcasts. And especially at an event, they're hearing and consuming like all this incredible advice from, podcasters and people that are from all different walks of life and backgrounds and experience levels. And so I, again, are just trying to help people understand how to start and what is getting in their way of starting and how to get past that and through that to the other side. It's been neat seeing those moments, right? Like, it's really hard to be like, I don't know if I can do this, and have a 9-year-old walk in front of you, sit down and interview someone, right? She didn't stop at all. She was like, I'm there. I know how to do this. She didn't even ask for help from me. She just sat down and it was good to go. So again, if a 9-year-old can do this, you can do this. We can all do this. We're letting ourselves get in our own way. So we got to figure out what those things are so that we can figure out how to get past those.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the cool thing about Podfest is that there are people who've been podcasting for years and years that attend. There are people that just started on their podcasting journey, and there are people that haven't started a podcast that want inspiration or to learn how to start something like this. Katie, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but as you were speaking to new video podcasters in particular, whether it was at Podfest or over the last year as video podcasting has become so ubiquitous, what's something like any surprising insights you get from talking to these people? Is it just that they're just overwhelmed with everything and they're just not starting out, simple enough? Or what do you learn from just talking to new video podcasters in general?
Well, I guess it seems like there's sort of two different camps. So there are people who are brand new, who are starting up, thinking about starting a podcast or have just started a podcast. And at the time that they're starting now, everyone is telling them to start with video. And so those people are experiencing like, oh, what does that mean? Oh, I don't want to be on camera. I want to, I'd rather be in my pajamas on the sofa. What does this mean for gear and the investment? How do I do that? Like, tell me more about YouTube. Like there's all of kind of those fears and questions on like what that means. On the other side of the coin, you have people who have been maybe podcasting for the last, up to 20 something years, right? And many of those folks are audio only podcasters who have made like an intentional choice not to have video. And now they're being told, well, video's the new thing. You have to have video in your podcast. Mm-hmm. And so there's a pushback from those folks that are like, do I? And if I do, like, does that actually mean that I need to go back and convert, potentially hundreds of episodes over to video? And I think instead of pushing those people and being like, well, if you're not in video, you're not a podcaster anymore, or like, jump on this bandwagon over here, this is the new trend. I think we need to make space and room for everyone. And we need to let people know that these days, like, a show is a show, a podcast is a podcast. Like, you can pick the format that works best for you. And there's ways to incorporate video in without needing to like completely change your show. There are, again, like there's, special events you could do. Maybe it's one aspect of your podcast is video. Maybe you're recording the video anyway, so you're releasing like short clips and that drives back to your audio podcast. I think we need to figure out again, like what what you actually want to accomplish when it comes to video, and what are the steps that are going to get you there, instead of the giant leap from like nothing to all video. Because not all shows need to be video. Like some benefit from having like cool video special moments or little just clips that are teasers and are fine not being. So I think it's trying to make sure that we're not just bowling over all these incredible audio podcasters who've been doing it for way longer than I've been in this space. I'm not going to go and tell them that they need to change everything about their show. They may not need to, or they may want to do it in a very different way than I even understand, and then help the new people figure out like what this means for them. Because they're actually in a great spot where, because they're brand new, they can go any way that they want to. So it's actually easier for them than someone who has a really long established show.
Yeah, and this is so. Billy Thorpe said something that I was thinking when you were talking, Katie. She goes, "Might as well capture both and not use it than not have it all." So that, So 100%. I don't think, like you were saying, I don't think every audio podcast needs to have video, but I think every podcast can be enhanced by having video because of just the ability that you can reach more people, and the lift with technology isn't as hard as it used to be. And so I just think, put that in your mind. Like, if you even think about like OG podcasters like Lou Mangello, who was just inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame, audio only for years and years, and he pushed back every momentum I've been to. He's starting to use video now, and he's recording it, so he has it to use later. So I think when you look at those people who are kind of have been doing it, don't have to do it, but are starting to, that might give you a little clue of like, maybe you should, if you're just getting started, maybe start with it. Just for that you could have it and it's easier to do than before. Really quick, I do want to say one thing though, is I have met all these people and hung out with them on at conferences, and every time I go, my relationship and people that I meet, it grows deeper. So do not be afraid to invest in yourself. I would actually invest in yourself in some of these, maybe even more than a microphone at the beginning, because you get to meet people who can encourage you and have a growth mindset. You may not have these type of people in your town. Like, I really don't have it here, but I do have a Connor Brown. I do have a Katie Fawkes. And so going to those things, like I'm telling you, when Creator Camp launches, grab those tickets because they go fast. That's a great way. There's a bunch of other conferences coming up. So invest in yourself. Tell Katie when you see her there, go hang out with her. She's awesome. She's not scary. Connor's a little bit, but he's still nice if you feed him. But invest yourself and go to some of these conferences. Last comment here about my the Ecamm and how great it is Chris Stone says, shout out to Ecamm for solving an issue we had going live on Amazon and LinkedIn in 48 hours. Amazing when founders lean in, respond, and solve for creators. So I'll just say that and leave up my little ecamm.com/chef for that, because it is very true. They have a great community. Katie, really quick, tell people where they can find you, everything that you've got. Thank you so much for being on the show. Once again, you're amazing. It's awesome.
Oh my gosh.
So tell people where they can find you.
It's so fun. Yeah. So I am at All Things Ecamm. So ECAMM, if you do a search for that. We have a community, a Discord space, a huge YouTube channel with lots of shows and workshops. Lots of places to be able to connect with me there. You can email me, katie@ecamm.com. I answer every email probably faster than I should. So you're more than welcome to drop me an email there. And if you like 80s and 90s movies, you can swing over most Thursday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. We are the VHS Club Podcast, the VHSClubPod.com.
Very fun show. I'm waiting for Ghostbusters. That's going to be, I want to come on for that one. So, Connor Brown, where can people find out the amazing Connor, unsinkable Connor Brown?
You can go to vacationkingdoms.com or follow me at Vacation Kingdoms. It's cold everywhere. Florida's a little less cold. Plan a vacation somewhere warm. Reach out to me, Connor, CONOR, at vacationkingdoms.com.
And as always, thank you guys so much. Thank you for Ecamm for sponsoring this show. As you can tell, we are big fans here. And thank you for Katie for coming on. Thank you for all of you in the audience. Dustin, Billy Thorpe, Gary Stockton. So good to see you again, my friend. Jim Fuse, everybody who shows up. We wouldn't be able to do the show without you. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.